All right. Welcome back to my critique of BioShock Infinite, or if you're just joining me, welcome. In this particular part, I'll be discussing the storyline and my criticisms of BioShock Infinite's story. Um, if you're interested in my thoughts on the gameplay, please refer to part one because I go into more detail there. But right now, I want to discuss the story, which was it was my main goal in talking about BioShock Infinite. And I want to start off by saying I enjoyed the story. Uh, I, I, I don't think BioShock Infinite is a bad game, and I think that's an important point to make. Is that I don't want to put anyone's I don't want to get anyone thinking that I was trying or deliberately trying to find holes in it, or that I was trying to tear it down when I was playing it, or that I was hard to please or whatever. I enjoyed the story. I liked Booker. I liked the idea of Columbia. I liked Elizabeth as a character. I liked the dynamic they had. There was this almost like surrogate father daughter dynamic that they had, and I enjoyed that. I like Comstock even. I like the idea of this guy, this prophet, quote unquote, right, who is in this fine city, which he treats as like an Eden, and he is serving the white upper class while oppressing the racial minorities, and it's an interesting idea. And then you have the Vox Populi with Daisy Fitzroy, and they provide the um, they're almost like terrorists. They're like rebels, and it's an interesting idea. And I think the premise is really cool. Um, However, I think so again. Okay, I like it. I do like it. I think it has potential, but it falls apart in just different ways, particularly because of the multiple universe um, element. Now, okay, I didn't mention this before, but this is going to have a lot of spoilers again. I've probably given away a lot just in these first few minutes. But so this, if you haven't finished the game, please don't watch this video yet. I would encourage you to play the game yourself, experience the ending, and form your own thoughts before you start to kind of go in and learn the things to expect. Because again, I didn't know what to expect from BioShock Infinite's ending. Uh, I had seen a thumbnail. I'd seen a thumbnail on a YouTube video that got me thinking, but again, I didn't know particularly what was going to happen. I knew there were multiple universes. I knew there were tears, right? And I knew it was Booker trying to get Elizabeth out of Columbia. So the problem is that Infinite Story is kind of like a missed target. The original BioShock introduced us to Andrew Ryan, who was this larger than life, but simultaneously grounded, a businessman. He was a full-fledged industrialist, and he created Rapture, right? His utopian city that went horribly wrong. And Rapture's idea was that you could be anyone you wanted down there. The law, morality, anything like that was not going to constrain you from doing what you wanted to do. So all the high-profile elites, the scientists, the artists, the musicians, the businessmen, they went down to Rapture and they could do whatever they wanted. They could flourish in that environment. Of course, this is a recipe for disaster. I mean, human nature is human nature. If you don't have safeguards in place, I mean, a security force is not a safeguard. I mean, but you could do a lot better than that. If you're not going to have oversight in place, it's not going to work. And so you have characters like Frank Fontaine, who come in, Sophia Lamb, who kind of manipulate the system to suit their own benefit, right? So in BioShock 1, we were treated with Rapture, but that was the story. Rapture was the story. That's it. Everything that happened was a result of Andrew Ryan and Rapture, and the characters that kind of sprouted from that. So the entire story of BioShock 1, in fact, there's not a lot of story. It's more about kind of walking around, finding out the story of this place, the history of this place, Rapture. And it was similar in BioShock 2. It was an evolution. It was Rapture was the springboard, and all these things just happened as a result. It was very natural. It was very, very flowing. It was very organic. We come to BioShock Infinite, And in the first few hours, we're presented with an interesting setting, Colombia, and it has a lot of interesting themes: jingoism, racism, uh, brutality, murder. The whole thing about Booker DeWitt being a veteran from Wounded Knee, from and having to deal with those demons. So there are a lot of interesting themes going on. American exceptionalism. Some of it is kind of hyperbolic. Some of it I couldn't take seriously. Uh, the fraternity where James Wilkes Booth is put on a pedestal literally, and Abraham Lincoln is demonized. That was kind of a little hyperbolic. I couldn't take it as seriously as maybe as I was supposed to. But the point is that it was an interesting idea. It was an interesting setting, and it provides a lot of foundation for a compelling story, compelling plot. Imagine BioShock Infinite, what it would have been if the focus had been on seeing this society deteriorate because of Booker's intrusion into it. And we see that, but we don't see enough of it. But I'll get to that. And so you play the first few hours, and then you meet Elizabeth. And then Elizabeth introduces you to the idea of terrors. And here is where BioShock Infinite falls apart, because it starts to push tears onto you from left field. Like, this is what the story is about. Suddenly the whole thing shifts and changes. Now, I am not going to spend too much time picking on the logical fallacies of it, or the things that don't make sense, or the inconsistencies. You can find a number of videos again on YouTube that do that in greater detail and with more effectiveness than I could do so. What I'm looking at this from a purely storytelling perspective, and how this idea affects the setting of the game, the characters, and the general flow and the pacing, and it just doesn't help it. Colombia was an interesting place. It was an interesting story, and it gets sidetracked because of the alternate universe, this idea of alternate universes. And in a way, so do Booker, Elizabeth, and Comstock. Now, I said before that we don't get to see enough of the fall of Colombia, and we really don't. We see it in its prime, and then immediately the people are gone. There's no one there. We're shooting people, we're scrounging, that's all we're doing. Everything is like a backdrop. The whole city is beautiful to look at, but it's a glorified backdrop. And then we start to jump through alternate realities. So Elizabeth starts opening up terrors, and we start moving through different realities, and we start going to different realities, and then everything just kind of like skips. So we never see the transition from idyllic Colombia to shithole Colombia. We only see one and the other, one and then the other. We skip all of the media. We skip all the good stuff. I mean, imagine going through the streets of Colombia and seeing the fight, seeing the people struggling. I mean, we get a glimpse of the horror of the place, like the real reality of it, in the shantytown area in Finkton, and we start to see the living conditions of the people down there, and it's awful. It's awful, and what a way to highlight the game. And now I'm sure a lot of critics have said that we don't get to see enough of the racism, etc. And I don't think we do either. I think this is just a game where it would have benefited from seeing more of this stuff naturally throughout the game. And if we had less of a focus on Elizabeth and the alternate realities, not to say Elizabeth isn't a good character, or that she isn't characterized well. I think she is, but I don't think that it serves the story in general. I think if there had been a different thrust to the story, in this case, the Columbia itself, as opposed to the alternate realities, it would have been all the better for it. Now, the problem with changing the focus of the game is that when you start to look at the story in general, you realize that the alternate realities really are the central idea of the story. I mean, Elizabeth is put in the tower on Monument Island because she has a special power. Booker is sent to rescue Elizabeth, at least initially, presumably, because she has a special power. And that power is to open up alternate realities. So if you were to change that facet of the game, you would change the entire story. You would change Elizabeth as a character, you would change Booker, you would change Columbia, and you would change just in general the story and the ending. So it's not easy to sort of go in there and find out what was the catalyst for what makes Infinite story kind of wonky. Um, you can say, oh, it's the alternate universe, but to go in there would require a rewrite, an almost a complete and thorough rewrite of the story. And this is where I just, I'm torn about it. I'm torn about it because I think that this story, again, could be better served if it focused more exclusively on Columbia. Now, some people would probably argue, but hey, wait a minute, the alternate universe is cool. It's a cool idea. I'm like, all right, yeah, I mean, in theory, it's cool and it's interesting, but I think it robs the potency from so much of the story. You end up hopping between all these alternate realities. You end up encountering these different versions of Booker, Elizabeth, and Comstock, and then, of course, then we had the ending. So I guess let me just go into it because that's where my main problem with the story lies, and it's with the ending. So we go to the ending, and we get a very heavy exposition-heavy sequence where Elizabeth explains the nature of alternate realities to us. Now, at this point, Elizabeth has destroyed the siphon, so she is omnipotent. So this is problem one with the ending that I have. Elizabeth becomes like a goddess. She becomes omnipotent. She becomes all-knowing, and so she just starts casually explaining the nature of alternate universes to Booker. And Booker, like the player, is, I guess, mind blown, right? He's sort of trying to process it, trying to absorb it, and Elizabeth is just explaining things casually, like, oh, this is how it is. There are infinite possibilities, infinite universes, and I can open up tears, and I know what's going on in each and every one of them right now. What has happened, what will happen, what is happening, what etc. And Booker is he's just kind of going along for the ride, like the player is. Now, again, problem one: Elizabeth is omnipotent, and so the revelations that we find out during the ending, that Elizabeth is Booker's daughter, that Booker is Comstock, we don't see Elizabeth react to these things. And I think, again, that's a loss to me, is a loss right there, is that Booker and Elizabeth, to me, was the story. I was very invested in their journey. I was very invested in the bond they had. So when it's revealed that Booker is Elizabeth's father, that Booker gave Elizabeth up to Comstock, it feels um, it feels like a missed opportunity to not explore the drama there, to not explore how these characters interact with each other after that revelation. So we don't get to really see Booker and Elizabeth talk about it. We don't get to see her reaction to it. We don't get to see what she cares and what she even thinks of Booker. Now, Elizabeth's perception of Booker has been changing throughout the game. In the beginning of the game, she didn't know him. She didn't know who he was. She trusted him. Then he betrayed her. Then she kind of spent time kind of hating him, and then sort of started trusting him again. It's very difficult, and we never get a good sense of how Booker and Elizabeth see each other. We know Booker cares about her, but we don't get to see, again, this revelation where they both kind of understand and figure out that they're related, that they're father and daughter. And I thought that was a missed opportunity. Now, moving on, the ending presents us with this idea that there are infinite worlds, right? And that Booker has to die to kill Comstock, right? We have to drown him during the baptism so that Comstock never exists. And I mean, apart from, okay, how does killing our Booker change that when he's already gone through the baptism? The whole ending left me feeling very empty. When you have this idea of infinite possibilities, infinite universes, it tends to make your experience, your universe, feel meaningless. And the reason that's so is because, again, there are infinite universes. That the Booker and Elizabeth that we journey with, that we share this game with, is just one universe out of an infinite sea, an infinite sea of lighthouses. They're no more important than another Booker and Elizabeth, and just because they succeed doesn't really make that important. Booker and Elizabeth succeed in any number of universes, and they fail in just as many too. So succeeding or failing, it doesn't really matter in the large scheme of things because there's just infinite possibilities. So playing the game feels almost like a waste. When Booker dies in the baptism, and Comstock dies subsequently, and Columbia, I guess, ceases to exist, Elizabeth also ceases to exist, You could consider that a success and that we stopped the cycle, but at the same time, it's infinite possibilities. It's infinite universes. There's no stopping anything. What we're really doing is just negating the whole game that we played through. Again, it feels meaningless. It feels like everything that we did to get to that point doesn't matter. And to me, that's the real crime of BioShock Infinite's ending, is that in trying to prove a point maybe about fatalism, about alternate universes, or whatever it was trying to do, it robs the potency from the main story. We don't get closure for Booker and Elizabeth. I know you can argue that Booker, we see Booker wake up in his apartment and he goes to check on baby Anna, but this isn't the Booker that we know, is it? How could it be? The Elizabeth that we knew is gone, and maybe that's a tragedy. Maybe you can see that as a tragic ending to the game, but I see it as again a missed opportunity, a sort of, we didn't get to see these characters go all the way with what we could have done, and it just feels, the ending to me feels like a lot of verbosity. It feels like a lot of bombast and fanfare and very sort of grandiose, and as if it's overwhelming you with this idea of alternate universes. But it fails to provide satisfaction. It fails to provide any satisfying closure to the story. It just feels empty to me. It feels like a lot of grandiosity, like it's just trying to impress you, make you feel its weight, make you appreciate it because it is so big and loud, and it comes across as empty. And then of course you have the Comstock Booker relationship, which makes no sense to me. I don't understand how Booker can be Comstock. Okay, he does the baptism, but then what spurs this hatred towards ethnic minorities? What spurs this love for his country and the founding fathers? What spurs this huge, giant appreciation of God and religion? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't see the connection from Booker, who is this haunted man, to suddenly becoming a born again as Zachary Comstock, and suddenly having this completely wildly different view of things. It doesn't make sense to me. It just, I don't know. It just feels like Booker didn't need to be Comstock. Comstock didn't need to be Booker, and Elizabeth didn't need to be Booker's daughter. I like that relationship. I like Booker being Elizabeth's father. I like what it does, but it doesn't feel necessary, and it feels like it was contrived. Like the whole circular thing, it just feels very circular. Feels very meaningless. Feels very sort of empty, and it just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't, and maybe that's me, maybe that's just my take on it, but it just doesn't feel right to me. And again, I just think it's a missed opportunity. I think we spend so much time focusing on the alternate realities, the alternate universes, that we tend to just get swept along with it, and we don't realize that Columbia was interesting, that Comstock was interesting, that Booker was interesting, that Elizabeth was interesting. They were all interesting on their own, and we didn't need this idea to be impressed upon it, and to suddenly take all of the attention, take all of the spotlight. So, we move on, and that's, again, the story is built around the idea of alternate realities. You can't get away from it. It tries to. And then another thing, you have the whole constants and variables, and constants can't exist in a multiverse where there are infinite possibilities. That flies in the face of the very idea of it. But whatever, playing along with the game, those are its rules, right? And I personally just feel that it just robs a lot of the potency from the game's story. I can't help but wonder, what would BioShock Infinite have been like if it had all been as superficial as it appeared to be, if Booker had been sent by some unknown party to capture Elizabeth and bring her back to New York so that they could make use of her power. Who are these people that would have sent her? Are these people that would have sent Booker to get Elizabeth? We don't know. We don't know. That's what makes it so interesting until we get to the end of the game. Finding out their motives would have been interesting. Dealing with Booker having to wrestle with this idea. Is he going to give Elizabeth up, or is he going to protect her? Dealing with Columbia in general as just a really haunting place. Dealing with Comstock as another party that Booker has to deal with. Another sort of brand of villainy, if you will. And then dealing with all that, I think that would have been a much more interesting game than without having this alternate reality pressed upon us. It seems unnecessary. It seems contrived. It seems like it comes out of left field for no other reason than to try to project or get across some idea about alternate realities and video games, whatever, etc. I don't know. It's not necessary. Uh, but it is what it is. And I guess you could say, well, okay, then what would Elizabeth's power be without alternate universes? And I think, well, I don't know. Maybe she could just manifest things with her mind, and they wouldn't necessarily have to be from an alternate universe. They're just things that she creates. But every time she creates something, it takes a toll on her. Immediately, I think that provides a much more drama to it. You're not just opening tears willy nilly, doing whatever you want, jumping between realities. I mean, there's a real idea, if Elizabeth changes reality, you know, what ramifications does that have? And I think these ideas are all glossed over, and it just goes to show that if you introduce an idea like time travel or alternate universes, you're going to screw everything up. It's very difficult to do well, especially when you go into as much detail as Infinite does. Personally, I think that the goal with Infinite, I think the reason behind the inclusion of this element of alternate universes was because Ken Levine and Irrational Games wanted to one-up the quote-unquote twist from BioShock 1. They wanted to blow people's minds, and they made a deliberate effort to do so, and I think the game fails in terms of its storyline because of that. The original BioShock succeeded because it was a natural story. It just kind of creatively, organically came about. And it surprised you, but it made sense, and it followed its rules, and it followed its logic. But with Infinite, it just feels like everything was built around the twist instead. So Rapture came first, and the twist came second. In BioShock Infinite, the twist comes first, and Columbia comes second. And to me, that's a big no-no. To me, that is the principal mistake behind all of BioShock Infinite, was in trying to blow people's minds. You make something contrived, you make something grandiose, but you fail to really kind of go all the way with it. You fail to get at the heart of what the story is trying to say. And to me, maybe this is just my personal take. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I'm looking at it incorrectly. But I think Booker and Elizabeth was the real thrust of the story. The relationship, the blossoming relationship between the two, and we don't get to see that really evolve the way it should, or the way it could. And it's interesting that I feel so strongly about it, and I feel so strongly about it because BioShock Infinite, to me, again, is a missed opportunity. There was so much potential in this game, but it was thrown out the window in favor of this idea that really doesn't help it, And I understand that this is a game that had a turbulent developmental history. I understand that there were time constraints, that there were budget constraints, that a lot of content was cut, that all content was modified, and maybe the game that we got wasn't the game that could have been, and maybe had it had more time in the oven, had it had more money, had it had more etc. resources, whatever, manpower, it could have been realized a lot better, and it could have come out as a much stronger game, much stronger work, more than just a video game, as much stronger story in general. But there's no way to know at this point. I mean, it's out. That's the game. I don't know if the DLC will change things. I doubt it, but that's how it is. And I don't know. I just, again and again, I don't see superficial twists or contrivances in a story making stories good. I think if you have an awesome idea, just let that idea do the work for you. A video game out right now on the market that's getting incredible acclaim, and rightly deserves, is The Last of Us. And The Last of Us is not necessarily original at all on its premise. In fact, anybody can point it and say, oh, it's another zombie story. But it executes everything so well. The excuse me. The storytelling and characterization are done so well, it doesn't matter. The pacing is spot on. The presentation is impeccable. The Last of Us really kind of shows that a simple story allowed you to flourish, allowed to develop and breathe, will do all the work for you. And I think this is the case with BioShock Infinite, where it just missed the mark. If Columbia had been allowed to develop and flourish, we would have had a much different game. Storyline would have been different. Parts of it would have been different, but I think it would have been all the better for it. Alas, what can you do? Now, so, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it in a different way. Maybe I went in with different expectations. Maybe I thought I was gonna get something different. I didn't get it, and maybe I'm just wanted the story to go in a different direction, and I'm sore that it didn't. I don't know. I see it as a missed opportunity. I see it as wasted potential, and I see that the game has lost a lot of its potency because of the way its story is structured and the element it wants to project and discuss. That's me. If you have a different opinion, feel free to comment below. I know it can be kind of controversial. In summary, I don't think BioShock Infinite is a bad game. I think it is a good game. But I think it has problems both in its storyline and gameplay that prevents it from being the game that it could have been. And maybe should have been. We talk about this being the game of the generation, game of the decade. I see all these hyperbolic comments. I don't think it deserves them. It's a good game, but I think we need to step back and look at this, as critically as we can and say, is this really the bar we want to set? Or can we set a different bar? And I don't know. Maybe that's not for me to decide, but those are my thoughts, and I'm glad I was able to convey them, and so we can talk about them. And sure, you can go to any other video and find the same things, but this is my take on it, and I really just think that in trying to blow people's minds and trying to impress upon people the grandiosity of this idea, Irrational Games, missed the mark. And it's a shame because BioShock Infinite could have been a really interesting game. And on top of that, a really interesting experience in the story. But that's how it is. Anyway, if you enjoyed this discussion, thank you. If you stayed with me as I got a little carried away with it, thank you for doing so. And hopefully I'll be able to do more discussions in the future. But we'll see what happens. So that's it for my thoughts on BioShock Infinite. Thank you for joining me. So see you around.